This video is going to walk you through the annotation for our orientation activity for using a Google Doc, because I noticed that some people were having some issues with finding the main idea and also finding the difference between claims and evidence. Now, this is something we're going to be working on all semester, but I wanted to kind of take a moment and show you how I would go through and annotate this particular article if I were the one reading it for class. So with all of the Google Docs we use, I've already made a copy of this. So this is my own copy that I can kind of work on. I am going to blow it up just a little bit to make it a little bit bigger on the screen. And then what it says is you need to highlight the sentences where a writer makes their main argument in yellow and phrases that support the argument in blue. So I have those two things to do. And then it's asking me to use the comment feature to respond with at least 4 comments. And most of you were able to do that very well, although some had some issues with leaving comments. The biggest things I saw, like I said, were that people missed the main idea or confused claims with the supporting evidence. And then the other issue I saw was that people annotated the first part and then it just kind of stopped. So there weren't annotations at the end. And that's really important to realize, because I understand that reading academic articles or articles that you don't select yourself, right, that are just assigned can be challenging, but you really want to make sure that you have focused concentration all the way through, because oftentimes there's important information at the end that is essential for understanding the content. So before I even start, the first thing I'm going to do is just kind of scan over and see what the heck I'm looking at. So the title is College Worth It? Is This Even the Right Decision? Gives me a really clear sense of what this is going to be about. And then I can use the kind of context clues, financial challenges after a college degree, critical thinking skills are crucial, low dedication to academic pursuits. Those headings become kind of anchors for me so that I know that this is going to talk about financial challenges after a degree. It's going to talk about critical thinking skills, and then it's going to wrap up with low dedication. So those are 3 big main points that I'm going to be looking for as I read. And it's really important to kind of scan through an article for headings and boldface print before you start, or to read the abstract before you start, because it kind of gives you a primer. It tells you what to look for. So I'm going to just get started. Is a college degree worth it? Yes, on average, college graduates fare much better in the job market than high schools. So this could be a main idea. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight it. But then down here it says, this question, however, ignores a more important set of issues. So that gives me a clue that this is actually not the main topic, because that word however clues me into the fact that this article is going to talk about something else. So I'm going to take that highlight off, actually. Are graduates getting value for their money, and are colleges preparing students for a smooth transition? So this is the main question that the article is going to answer. So it's defining worth it, right? So it's not just about do you get a good job, but it's also about, are you getting prepared and value? So I'm going to make these little comments on the side because it helps me kind of clue into where important things are in the article. So there's no doubt those with a college degree earn substantially more wages. I'm going to underline that for myself just so I can have it for later. And even though the recent recession was difficult, the current population study indicates that twice as many young adults without college degrees were unemployed. So that is evidence, right? That's a statistic. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to highlight that in blue because that could be supporting evidence. But then we get down here to the word but our research published in a recent book shows that colleges are too often failing students with critical thinking, problem solving, and written communication skills. So this sounds to me like a lot more like a main topic. So now I'm going to leave that one in the bright yellow as the main idea, because remember, that's the instructions. Where they make their main argument, we want to highlight it in yellow. So we followed graduate. So this is explaining their research. So I'm going to just leave notes the same as I would if I was writing on a printed copy. As they transitioned from a range of 4-year institutions, 2 years, only half of the college graduates were employed full-time and earning over $30,000. So if the main idea is colleges are failing to impart students with critical thinking skills that are important for the job market, this could possibly be something that adds, but it's not specifically showing that they're not prepared, right? This shows that only half of college grads have work. And so the important thing that you can notice here is when I'm doing this, I'm doing this for me. So you're going to be turning in annotations that show me that you have read and engaged, so you can kind of get credit for that work. But these notes should be notes that make sense to you. So they don't have to be written in like some sort of fancy academic English. They should be written so that you can understand them. Others struggled to various degrees. 7% were unemployed, worked part-time. Okay, so it seems like this is beginning to build the argument. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight this in blue because these seem to be the first kind of opening supporting evidence that they provide. Considering that most had taken out loans to finance their college education, 30% borrowed $30,000 or more. This is another thing that is getting to value. It's not exactly the evidence is like proving their point 100%, but it's definitely building it. Perhaps not surprisingly, 3/4 were receiving financial assistance from their parents and 1/4 were living with their families. Okay, so that all seems pretty, like some pretty big evidence there. So then it's going to shift to significantly, and I know it's a shift because there's the bold-faced heading here. So significantly, the graduates we surveyed who left college with high levels of critical thinking skills were less likely to be unemployed and less likely to have a job. So this is a new idea. I'm going to just make a note here. And because of the way it's phrased, I'm going to assume that this must mean that there are college grads that don't have these skills. Okay, so then I'm going to keep going. So graduates who performed well on the college learning assessment, I'm going to go ahead and just make a note that this is what they're using to test, because it seems important and I might want to get to it later. Were less likely unemployed 2 years after those who performed less well. So the thing about this right now I'm asking myself is like, what does this have to do with value of college? And I might even put that down there, like, because it seems like it's kind of on a different topic. Similarly, graduates who performed well were less likely in unskilled occupations. And if they've gotten jobs, graduates who performed well were less likely to lose their jobs. Okay, so again, this isn't supporting the idea that college isn't preparing people. Because what this is saying is, so some people are prepared and some people aren't. Which must mean it's not just college, but it's something to do with the students, is what I would think. So, low dedication. Seniors, as well as sophomores, spent very little time studying alone and faced limited reading and writing demands. American college students' dedication to pursuits has shown a drop since the 1960s, when being a full-time college meant there were 15 hours in a class and 25 hours studying. So this is a big change in how students study. But I still don't quite understand what that has to do with the value of college. Indeed, college students in the U.S. spend less time on academic pursuits than all but one European country. Okay, so this doesn't necessarily support the idea of the value of an education. So I'm going to highlight it because I think it's an interesting idea that I might want to come back to. So I'm going to highlight it in a different color. So in addition to failing to facilitate the development of general skills for students, colleges do not provide adequate institutional support towards apprenticeships. So this is another claim, right? This is kind of building. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in a lighter yellow. The question I still have, though, as I'm reading is like, whose fault is it if students aren't working? So one of the things you'll want to pay attention to as you read is figuring out if you can ask questions about the topic. So among graduates, those who used college resources were less likely working in unskilled applications. So this is building the kind of idea that if you use the resources, it does work, right? Many others relied on formal means or their friends and family. College is not about preparing for the job market. It's also about preparing them for participation in a democratic society. So again, this feels like another claim. Actually, I'm going to do this differently so I can see it. So again, this feels to me like another claim, which makes me wonder, the original claim that I'd highlighted, maybe that's not the main claim, because these other two mini claims seem to be doing different things, right? Then it's talking about like graduates reading newspapers 2 years after college completion. They read fewer than 40% read newspapers. Okay, so my question is, what does this have to do with college? Because when you think about like overall the way that this article's going, I'm kind of wondering how they're building their argument. I'm starting to think maybe I don't have the right claim. This goes back to that idea of democracy. So I'm going to bold that. I'm going to put this in some different colors just so I can find it again if I need it, right? Because those colors are going to help me link. Again, you don't have to do this. This is just my way of making sense of it. So when I come back to it, next week or the week after, I don't have to reread everything. I can kind of go straight to my notes. So while college graduates fare better in the labor market, many leave college without substantially improving their critical thinking, complex reasoning, and writing skills, nor have they internalized practices conducive to participating in a democratic society. Okay, so this here feels a lot more like a thesis statement to me because it's really bringing together multiple points that we just read about. Whereas the first one that we underlined, it only talks about the labor market, right? This one is building, and it really talks about the democratic society. These concerns become heightened when consideration and comparison to other nations. We're not faring particularly well in preparing students in an increasingly globalized world. Okay, so this is a weird article, it seems like, because this right here feels a lot more like the main argument even than this. So I'm going to come back through here. I'm going to make this a lighter color so that I can find it, but it's not the main argument. But if I'm now thinking that this is my main argument, then we have different points that they leave college without critical thinking skills. So I'm just going to turn this into some different colors so I can read it. And they have not internalized practices with a democratic society, right? So there's two parts. So now when I think about my supporting details, it makes a lot more sense because it talks about these various parts of the main argument throughout here. So some of these other ones where I had questions about like is this building on the original claim? If I think of this here, right, as the original claim or as the main claim, then some of these other notes make a lot more sense. So this is one example of how you can kind of work through a piece of writing. And it really does take from beginning to end for you to pay attention to the entire piece, because as you can see here, this is not a 5-paragraph essay. The main point comes at the end. It doesn't come at the beginning. Especially this information here about, a democratic society. That's a large portion of the information that this gives. So as you're reading through these, and we're going to be reading through different articles, and you'll be doing annotations like this all semester, keep working on asking yourself questions about, is this the main argument? How do I know it's the main argument? How do different parts of the essay kind of pin themselves together? If I were reading this, I would wonder if they even answer their question. For me, the idea of a democratic society maybe would have been better if it was integrated right at the very beginning so that I knew as a reader what I was getting into. So these are all different ways that you can kind of interact with and engage with an annotation. For this particular article, the main argument is here. It's this 2-part argument about, yes, they fare better in the labor market, but no, they are not prepared. So that when you come down here, a lot of people selected C as the answer, but nowhere in this does it talk about colleges making tuition money. So you want to be careful that you're reading really carefully and reading really accurately. Okay, if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. Otherwise, this is a skill we'll be practicing all semester, so don't worry about getting it perfect. It's just a matter of kind of developing what works for you as you read.